literature in any content area. So whether you're planning to be a middle school PE teacher or you are planning to teach high school music, or maybe you want to be an elementary art teacher, which is where I spent many, many years in the elementary art classroom, English language arts can enhance your curriculum. It can give your students the opportunity to use what they have been learning in their reading and writing classes in your classroom, and it can also help them deepen their understanding of your standards. After I looked at that standard and figured out exactly what project my students were going to create, I would then try to figure out what piece of literature is going to best support their foundation, what is going to help build background knowledge for them to be able to create this work.
In my field, literacy is important because students learn through reading and music, tracking left to right, being able to follow a story as it goes along, using the expression of the story. Is it a happy story, a sad story? And in music, we have to show the expression of the music. And so they're learning all these things through reading that they can apply to music.
Well, the big obvious answer I think we always think about in math is they have word problems. And so a lot of times students will struggle answering a problem not because they don't understand the math, but because they're struggling reading it. So it's really important that they're getting a good reading foundation from not only their language arts and reading teachers, but from their math teacher, and helping them dissect a word problem and pay attention to what the words are actually saying, because we don't want to assume that the student is not understanding the math when it's really just the reading that's keeping them from answering the question.
As a fifth grade teacher, I think the importance of literacy integration is, number one, it helps students learn the content that you're trying to deliver in a variety of ways. It also helps them generalize the strategies that you're introducing in your literacy block, such as making predictions and making inferences or visualizing the material. Instead of just doing that in your literacy block, you're doing that in science and social studies and math and across all subject areas, which helps students generalize those skills.
So if I was doing a project with kindergarten students, that's probably going to be a picture book read aloud that I read to them. Probably something similar at the beginning of first and second grade also. For my older students, it could be a read aloud also, or they could be looking at different pieces of historical writing, or maybe they're reading an artist biography, and I have them using some close reading practices to really dissect that artist life before they begin to do some type of artwork that is inspired by that artist.
We have a school-wide Smart 7 strategy that we use on all of our paragraphs, and so I will pass out an article on a specific composer that we may be playing a piece of their work, and then we will learn more about that composer with our Smart 7 strategies that is implemented throughout our school.
I go about planning by looking at the material that I'm going to present. For instance, in social studies, I'll take a look at the upcoming lesson and look at some of those text features. In our nonfiction unit in our literacy block, we look at text structure, and text features is a big part of it. So I'll look at what text features or structure that social studies material has and plan accordingly. A lot of the times I'll have students do a pre-reading strategy where they'll look at titles, boldface words, subheadings, questions at the end of the text before they even start reading and discussing the material, so they can get an idea of what they're going to be reading and have an idea of what's coming at them next.
So on the first day of school, I start 6th grade math with a read aloud, and some of them kind of groan at first when I say we're going to do a read aloud, but some of them are kind of excited because they're a little bit nervous about being the big kid, and so it's nice to see something familiar from elementary school. And so we read aloud the math curse, which is my favorite my favorite math book, really, but even my favorite picture book. It's just all about how a student sees math anywhere he goes, because his teacher, Mrs. Fibonacci, which is always fun to explain to the students because most people just think she has a funny name, but there's actually a Fibonacci sequence. So it's really mathematical, and then there's hidden things, so my advanced students like to learn more about it. There was actually one part where it had a pattern, and it wanted them to, or the student was trying to figure out the next pattern, and so I had my kids actually try and figure it out. So it's fun to just stop and do the math as well. And so after we read it on the first day of school, they had a homework assignment on the first day, and it was to spend the rest of the week finding anywhere they see math. So I told them, I'm going to put a math curse on you. And so I asked them to create it any way they wanted. Some turned in PowerPoint, some made big posters, some just listed it out because they're very logical thinkers. Some wrote me really interesting stories about how their teacher put a math curse on them and then kind of rewrote the story for me. And then some of them just drew like a little picture and a diagram. So these are some of the things that they saw. They noticed that when they were at the grocery store, they had sales, like a 15%, or when they're going to the gas station, they're paying for gas, cooking. When they were at a restaurant, they needed to leave a tip. Even when they're watching TV, and they even noticed the construction workers have to use a lot of math when they're building and laying out things. So it was really fun to see the different creative minds that they had, and also to get them thinking like, hold on, math really is everywhere. So it was really cool.
After my students had completed their art project, it was very important that they used, I gave them the time to do self-reflection. So I would have my students do a self-evaluation. So they would look back and reflect on their work. And also it was very important for that reflection not just to be something where they checked off a box, that was another way for them to express themselves. And in this way, instead of expressing themselves through their artwork, they would express themselves through their written words. So maybe that would be an artist statement, or I may pose questions to them, or I possibly could have them collaborate with one another and do artist interviews with each other, to where they were creating their own artist biographies to explain their artwork.
So at my school, like how most schools work, reading and science all correlate with what they're teaching when it comes to writing. And so I asked the English teachers what unit they're working on, and then I find like 2 weeks ago they were working on persuasive essays. And so I find a prompt based on music that requires the student to write a persuasive essay. And they're writing about music, they're still learning my content, but they're using the stuff they're learning in other classes. And then after I grade it, I give it to their English teacher so that they can understand really where the child is at in an in-depth way, more so than what they're getting in their class.
Anytime there's a short answer, they have to explain it, and I tell them I really need a detailed explanations. Test corrections I make them write, they have to explain to me why they missed that problem, and I don't accept it if they don't have a full sentence or they're just not giving me any details. So it really talks about the details using the math vocab, so they know how to use math vocab and they can then use those vocab skills somewhere else. The other day, we did an assignment where they had to create their own word problem based on a graph that was given to them. So
I want to encourage you to always use literature in whatever field you go into in education. So as much as I hope that I put artists into the world, I really want to make sure that I showed my students that they can take what they're learning in their classroom and give them that possibly the first opportunity to take what they've learned in their English language arts classroom and use that outside of their classroom, which gives them the opportunity to practice what they are going to do with their education for the rest of their lives, and that is use what they have learned out in the real world.